Okay, so the first idea that I had was to, I guess, to share a way to be able to assess students because I know a lot of the times, teachers might be using like a task analysis or some way to measure the student's ability to be able to um, complete a certain task, right? So I got this example. So this is just an example of the plays game with the peer and adult. Um, Again, this is just a textbook example of a task analysis. So we have here, here's a domain. So you got initiate, choice, prepare, and then they add more things like core, all this other stuff. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a rubric, and it's going to have these 11 separate tasks. So then here's the rating scale. So you have either yes, no, not applicable, with adaptations, and then comments. So the one that I'm going to create is going to be either yes or no. And I'm not going to include these last three columns because there's another way that we can create these with Schoology. Okay, so that's going to be the first thing. The first thing is how to create a form that a teacher can then use to assess students. Okay, so let me minimize this. I'm going to go back into my Schoology. Okay, so where I'm at right now is I am in my resources. Okay, so the reason why I'm here is because I'm going to create it in my resources, so then I can pull it into my courses. I could, I could go into my courses and then from here also create the rubric, but then that would mean that would add one more step because if you created it in a course, then you'd have to move it from your course into your resources and then push it into each one of your classes, and it just adds a couple more steps. So I'm just going to go ahead and start off on resources. Okay, so from within resources, what I did is I created another one of these little collections. Okay, so it'll always default to home. And then there's extra ones down here that I ended up creating. So what I have is I have a training collection of training material. So if you wanted to create your own, you just click right here on this little box that says add collection. You give it a name and then a new collection pops up. And so what I did is I created a folder for ALE. Okay, so within my ALE folder, so I'm going to click inside of it. We're going to create the rubric in here. Okay, so I'm going to go into add resources. What we're going to do is we're going to add a rubric. Okay, so here I get this little window that pops up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the one that I want it to look like right over here next to it, so that way I can just kind of look off of it. And I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so if you have, I'm sure you're going to have like a paper copy of the rubric next to you. So yeah, use that instead. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to, well, let me make this bigger. I'm going to give it a title first. So I'm going to call this, let's just call this task analysis rubric. And of course, you can give it whatever name you want to. Okay, so I hit tab. So then here's where we can start to add our criteria. Okay, so going back over here to our example, it does, because this one's already, the tasks have already been, figured out what it is, right? What I'm going to do just to make it more generic is I'm going to add the domains. So I'm going to put initiate, and then I'm going to make choice, prepare, problem solve, terminate, communication. I'll put communication before terminate, but really it's just these big ones that are in the parentheses that I'm going to put, because that's the ones that for me I'm going to be evaluating my students with. So then that way I can keep using the same rubric for different activities. Okay, I don't have to keep creating rubrics over and over for each one of them. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with initiate. So up here I'm going to put initiate. And then in here, you can add a description if you wanted to. Okay, so now I'm going to put another one. So there's initiate. This one is choice. This one is prepare. This one is monitor, I guess, monitor quality. This one is, I guess if you wanted them to monitor their tempo too, you can rate them. And again, this is however your system, the way you have it. Problem solve. And what else we got? Terminate. Actually, I'm going to put communicate before terminate. And then terminate. And then social, I guess if you wanted to rate how they socialize with each other. Okay, so now I'm going to make this bigger again. Okay, so here we have our criteria. So we're going to rate them how they initiate the task, if they make good choices, or if they choose the task. Like, let's say they were going to do a board game and they made a choice about which board game they wanted to play. They prepare their materials or whatever it is, or they prepare themselves. They monitor their quality. They monitor their tempo. They problem solve. They communicate. They terminate, and then we're going to rate how they socialized. Okay, so now across we have our rating scale. Okay, so going back over here to our sample, we have yes, no, like yes they did it, no they didn't do it, it was not applicable, or they did it but with adaptations, and then comments. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put yes or no, and then I'll show you where we can do these 3 columns over here. Okay, so in here on the 4, I'm just going to put yes. Oh, actually, yeah. So it's telling me right here, the grading scale point value must be strictly numeric. Okay, so I'm going to put a 1 for yes. Oops. Well, I guess first we have to get rid of these right here. So if I want to get rid of, because I'm just going to do 2 columns. When you hover, you'll see this little gray X. So I'm just going to click the X and it deletes it, right? So you see how it deletes. I should have did this first before all the other ones, because now since I created these other ones, I'm going to have to do it for all of these. So I guess the first time when you just have one row, delete the grading scales first, and then you don't have to do what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to X, 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 X. Oops. Okay, so now we just have 2. Okay, so the scale, what I'm using is a 1 for yes, and then a 0 for no. Oops, let me do this one. Guess we got to start here with 0. And I'm going to show you because I know this. So what Schoology does is it does actually give them a score. And I know whenever you're rating, you don't necessarily want a score like a grade. And there is a way to get Schoology to not give them a grade on this, because this is used more for assessment, not so much for assigning a grade, right? Oops. Okay, so 1, yeah, I would recommend setting the grades first before, because then you don't have to do this over again. Okay, so I just paste. So what I did is I did Control C to copy it, and then I'm doing Control V to paste it. It just kind of speeds things up. Okay, so this one is no. Control C to copy. Control V to paste it. So we are done now. Over here on the right side, it just tells us the points because they can earn up to 1 point. Okay, so we are done here, at least with this rubric, the task analysis rubric. So I'm going to hit create. Okay, so here's our rubric. And if we wanted to take a look at it, I'm going to click on it. This is what it looks like. So we have our criteria, and then we have our grading scale, either 1 or 0. 1 for yes, 0 for no.